Good evening and welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robarts. Tonight, 6 men murdered in an apartment building in Surrey, British Columbia. 2 of them innocent bystanders. For more than a year, police chased down their suspects, but the road to justice was full of twists and turns.
We got a heads up that the Surrey Fire Department was code 3 to what appeared to be a mass casualty gas leak at the Balmoral Towers in Surrey.
My life is missing. You know, Christopher's my heartbeat. He's missing.
Once the firefighters got into the apartment, they realized, oh my Lord, this is not a mass casualty, this is a mass murder.
6 people are killed in a Surrey apartment building. Police still on scene looking for answers.
Is my Christopher up there? Are you taking him out? And he didn't answer me.
The RCMP were very, very secretive in their investigation.
Tuesday, they had the press conference, and they had already declared Ed Schellenberg innocent.
It is our wish to make perfectly clear that Ed was caught in circumstances that spun out of control, ending in his death because of where he needed to be to do his job.
And then they declared Christopher innocent.
Police suggest he may have stumbled onto the crime scene and was murdered.
When we went past the first year anniversary and people were saying, well, what's up with this? You know, are you ever going to catch these killers? It looked like there was no progress at all.
Nobody's been charged, nobody's been brought to justice.
I got an anonymous phone call saying, be in courtroom 20. The person wouldn't tell me why I should be there. They just said, don't miss this. Then they brought in an accused, a guy in an orange jumpsuit. Then in come the RCMP, 1 officer on either side of the family members from the Balmoral Tower. Then the person who is now known as Person X, we're not allowed to say his name, stands up and pleads guilty to 3 of the 6 murders. And I just nearly fell over. And then, boom, it's over.
Matthew Johnson and Cody Havishar have been charged with conspiracy to commit the murder of Corey Lai and with the first-degree murders of Ed Schellenberg, Corey Lai, Michael Lai, Edward Narong, Ryan Bartolomeo, and Christopher Mohan.
I've thought to myself, okay, I will make a deal with the devil.
And then you've got, the gangsters, standing up in court and ratting each other out. And then, you find out that the cops have been doing some funny business with potential witnesses.
We begin tonight with a bombshell development in the Surrey Six murders, and it may have disastrous consequences for the investigation.
Here now is Jules Knox with Surrey Six, seeking justice.
After 6 men were executed on the 15th floor of the Balmoral Tower, police started piecing together a case against the cold-blooded killers.
The police knew within hours or days who their suspects were and focused on them, but there were not arrests on the murder until April of 2009, so getting close to 2 years after the fact.
Behind the scenes, for those 2 years, police were working on flipping gangsters into rats, wiretapping informants for enough evidence to secure a conviction. Key to their case, they convinced one of the killers to admit to pulling the trigger in the execution of 3 victims. A publication ban means that we can only call this man Person X. And he received a lesser sentence by agreeing to give up his associates. That let police arrest who they saw as the kingpin in this, Red Scorpion gangster Jamie Bacon. He was taken into custody the same day Person X pleaded guilty in court.
Today is a very good day.
police swept in, arresting Matthew Johnston, seen here with a black hoodie and a large emblem on his back, and Cody Havishar.
I can now confirm that all three have been arrested and that James Bacon is also charged with the first-degree murder of Corey Lai. Additionally, Matthew Johnson and Cody Havishar have been charged with conspiracy to commit the murder of Corey Lai and with the first-degree murders of Ed Schellenberg, Corey Lai, Michael Lai, Edward Narong, Ryan Bartolomeo, and Christopher Mohan.
And note that the last name of brothers Corey and Michael Lai is sometimes pronounced as Lal in this story.
People who've been following this case have likened it to some kind of mafia movie, but of course, it's all very real. 2 of the so-called Surrey Six were innocent bystanders. The other 4, alleged drug dealers involved in some kind of turf war or payback with a rival gang. The RCMP today revealing just how exhaustive this investigation was, with as many as 50 to 200 investigators working at it around the clock. 18 months and millions of dollars later, they now have first and second-degree murder charges. And police say there'll be more arrests.
It's been 5 years, 11 months, and 11 days since the 6 men, 4 alleged drug dealers and 2 innocents, were slaughtered at the Balmoral Towers. Jamie Bacon is charged on a separate indictment, and he will have his own trial. Today, fellow alleged Red Scorpions Cody Havishar, Matthew Johnson, and Michael Lee all pleaded not guilty to their charges.
Our client is looking forward to finally having this case get underway because he's been in custody for a number of years, and he's looking forward to the opportunity to prove his innocence of the charges that he faces.
So the evidence at trial was that there was a gang called the Red Scorpions. The gang was actually formed, rather disturbingly formed, in a youth jail by kids who were caught up in the youth system. That gang then at a later point affiliated with the Bacon brothers. They were on their own a fairly high-profile criminal gang, 3 brothers involved in that world.
What the evidence showed is that that merger took place because it would give the Red Scorpions a wider area in which they controlled the drug trade. Corey Lau was a person who was a drug dealer in Surrey. Mr. Bacon didn't want Corey Lau to be dealing drugs in Surrey and imposed what he called a tax on Corey Lau.
He asked for $100,000 as tax or something. Corey Lau didn't give him a cent.
There were 4 people who were part of a group that were involved in drug trafficking and cooking drugs in the apartment.
That's where a man named Sofon Sek came in. He was an associate of Corey Lai, someone the men inside the apartment would open the door to.
So he goes up, knocks on the door. Somebody looks at him through the peephole. Oh, it's so fun. They open the door, he walks away, and they burst in.
When the Red Scorpions stormed into apartment 1505, they found their target, Corey Lai. But there were also 3 other men in the suite: Ryan Bartolomeo, Corey's brother Michael, and repairman Ed Schellenberg, who was fixing the fireplace, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. A few minutes later, a 5th victim, Eddie Narong, opened the door. He saw who was inside and started running. Matt Johnson chased him down, taking him captive. And that was likely around the time that across the hallway in 1504, Christopher Mohan was getting ready to leave to meet his friends for a basketball game.
At the elevator was Matt Johnson standing on guard.
And so what does Matt Johnson do?
Grabs hold of Christopher, drags him. This kid appeared from nowhere. And Christopher's last words were, "What am I doing here? I don't know any one of you." But they shut him up, they punched him. That's why his mouth was swollen, because he spoke up, and these people are not used to people speaking up.
The killers made the victims lie face down in 2 groups of 3, their arms above their heads.
They didn't want any witnesses, so they pulled everybody inside. Then they put hoods over their heads.
Court heard that Cody Havishar and Person X pulled the trigger. 19 shots were fired, emptying 2 handguns. A sweatshirt was used as a silencer, and it was dumped in the hallway as the killers fled. Six years after the Surrey slaying, as the trial moved forward, the public slowly started to learn more about the motive for murder.
The Crown says that Corey Lau was the target of the murder plot because he refused to pay the Red Scorpions a $100,000 fine for dealing drugs on their turf.
The first witness, Norman Carruthers, the building caretaker, sobbed as he described looking for furnace repairman Ed Schellenberg, only to find 6 bodies in Suite 1505, pulling the leg of one man who he thought might still be alive, only to discover the blood and back out of the suite.
Today, court heard from the nephew of one of the innocent victims, a young man who would have been in that suite if not for a last-minute decision by his uncle.
Yes, Chris, barely a week into his job as a gas fitter, 20-year-old Zachary Brown was working in the family business with his uncle, servicing the fireplaces at the Balmoral Tower. He was supposed to service Suite 1505, but building manager Tracy Carruthers told him that his uncle would do that suite. Earlier, she had told his uncle, Ed Schellenberg, that there were suspicious people living in there, possibly drug dealing going on. While Zach was then working in Suite 1508, he says he heard several loud noises coming from the 15th floor, another part of the floor. He said they were very steady and grouped together. There were no pauses between the sounds. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He told police shortly afterwards that it sounded like banging, possibly something being moved, and it was not like gunshots. But it was gunshots that could have been meant for him. Later, RCMP Corporal John Hansen testified how, wearing a hazmat suit and breathing apparatus, he entered that suite sometime after 6 p.m. to see whether there was a gas leak or possibly a meth lab or other hazardous situation there. But he discovered 6 bodies, pools of blood about some of their heads, a gunshot in one man's head, and an empty pistol lying there. He then called for other officers to secure it as a crime scene.
The evidence suggests that apartment 1505 was a stash house for drugs, and Corey Lai and his associates were cooking crack cocaine when the killers stormed in. The suspects arrived at 2:30 in the afternoon. They murdered 6 people in less than 20 minutes.
There was evidence from the girlfriend of one of the accused that beforehand they had met in an apartment sort of 5 minutes drive from where this murder happens. And they had staged essentially to clean bullets and guns, certainly bullets with Windex.
That staging apartment was Cody Havisher's place at the Stanley, a few blocks away from the Balmoral Tower. After the slaughter, the killers returned here. They stripped out of their bloody clothing and boiled the victims' cell phones. Police started publicly searching the Stanley apartment 3 days after the murders.
So one of the wild things that happened in this case is that by sheer chance, the police had staged surreptitious surveillance at the staging apartment, not because they thought they were killers, but because they thought there was drug dealing activity. And so that footage ended up being of high relevance because it showed these people coming and going from the murder scene at certain times, and in turn that evidence matched up with some eyewitness descriptions from the apartment building where the killings happened. The police realized to actually attribute planning, premeditation, and intention to kill, not things got crazy and someone pulled out a gun. To get the case to that standard, they needed gang insiders.
It subsequently came out that person X had essentially confessed to his girlfriend what had happened. I think he was really troubled by it, to be honest with you. In any event, he spoke to his girlfriend. The cops got on to the girlfriend. They had split up. Cops worked her pretty hard to flip her to make her a potential witness. And I guess they got some pretty good information from her. Person X, when he was pleading out in court when I was there, you almost wondered if he was having some kind of like a psychological trauma or something like that. He was clearly trying to expunge the horrible things that he had done.
He's the one who put a bullet through my son's head. What he put forward is seeing Mrs. Mohan day in and day out on TV has prompted me to be the better side of me. People say and do things to save themselves after the fact.
And Person X's life was in danger more than a year after the Surrey massacre. Before any arrests, Jamie Bacon had turned on Person X and ordered his murder. Person X escaped with a bullet lodged in his lower back. And 4 months later, he walked into court and struck a deal.
It allowed him to skate out of a first-degree murder times 6, which would have meant he'd never get out of jail, realistically, and instead the possibility of release on parole after 10 years.
Person X was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 15 years. And under the plea deal, he had to testify in court against the other accused murderers in the Surrey Six slaughter.
Person X was one of the killers. He was there in the apartment. He knew all of the planning. He would have given the Crown that rarest of things, which is an eyewitness to the murders.
But then the judge held a hearing where not even the men accused of murder could hear what was going on inside. And their lawyers were locked out too.
The way it came about was that there were coded informers, so people that had gone to the police and said, I know something, here's my information. The law says that a confidential informer has to be treated as absolutely sacrosanct. There's no way that others should be able to learn their identity, so they get the highest protection possible. A lawyer appointed as a friend of the court came in, but really with a mandate to serve as a substitute for the defense. His mandate was to challenge the Crown and to challenge the claim on our behalf in our absence. It ended up being, as we understood it, close to 40 days of hearings. And our view of it was, it's got to be something exceedingly serious. We're all working madly to be ready to run this big, long trial. We received word that there's been a ruling. It said that the Crown was not permitted to call Person X. There's a problem here. You don't get to lead the star witness, the killer, the eyewitness. So their critical witness gets thrown overboard on the eve of trial. They sized it up and said, we've still got our case. We're going to rely on Person Y. And he, in my experience doing trials, was the most dramatic, incredible, fascinating, infuriating witness that you could ever imagine.
Welcome back. As the case headed to trial, the courts ordered multiple publication bans. Key gangsters and admitted killers had their identities protected, which is why we can only refer to them as Person X or Person Y. We now return to Jules Knox with Surrey Six, Seeking Justice.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a bombshell development in the Surrey Six murders, and it may have disastrous consequences for the investigation.
I got a tip from a very good police source saying that there was an investigation into Derek Brassington.
In early 2010, rumors started swirling that a senior RCMP investigator in the Surrey Six slaughter was having an affair with a gangster's girlfriend, a key witness.
Chris, we're here at RCMP headquarters with some very disturbing information tonight. A senior RCMP investigator is himself under investigation tonight for allegedly having an inappropriate relationship with the girlfriend of a key person in the largest mass murder in BC history.
And we did that from the steps of the RCMP headquarters as a live head at 5 o'clock at night. And while I'm on the air, my phone is ringing, and I look down, and it's the Solicitor General for British Columbia who's calling me. So I answer the phone, but I don't talk because I'm still on the air talking. And as soon as the live hit's over, I put the phone to my ear, and he says, "Are you kidding me?" Is that for real? He says, I knew nothing about it.
I was not even given a heads up as Assistant General. I was not given a heads up with regard to it.
That is something that is troubling for me because I was not made aware that even something of this nature had taken place.
Now we had to bring in the Ontario Provincial Police Service to do the investigation on the allegations against these officers.
They had search warrants, wiretaps, surveillance on Derek Brassington and 2 or 3 of his other co-workers. It was a monster scandal.
As Ontario Provincial Police investigated the alleged officer misconduct, the trial of the killers in the slaying moved forward.
There's a witness whose name was referred to as Person Y. In line with that description of him being the most incredible witness that you could imagine, on his own account, had killed people repeatedly. He said by strangling, by shooting, and by stabbing.
Why was Person Y put under a publication ban?
For his own safety, because he's in a jail facility. So the murders happen in October of 2007. At the end of that calendar year, there was evidence about a trip involving a number of gang members to Mexico, and he wasn't invited. He makes this fierce decision that he's going to go to the police. Unlike most of us who wouldn't know who you call at the police if you wanted to become an agent in a murder case, he called up the investigators that investigated him for murder, knew them to be effective, and built some rapport with them. The police equipped him on a number of occasions with the wires and sent him off to record conversations, set up little scenarios where he and Matt Johnson get arrested and then released to see if they start to chatter about things. And Person Y came in and testified in the trial that, in fact, he had volunteered to do the assassination. His plan was to lure Corey Lyle into a parking lot and simply kill him that way, and that over time a different plan seemed to develop, and that he had some disdain for Matt Johnson and Cody Havishar and thought of himself as superior to them and didn't want to be affiliated with whatever they were doing, so he's no part of the plan.
Was Person Y compensated for testifying against the accused?
Yes, and to the tune of over $1 million, and given a Mercedes Roadster.
The amount of money is just incredible. For us to compensate a gangster, a killer, in that fashion is absolutely terrible. I cannot believe that we, as professionals, investigators, law enforcement, would resort to paying that amount of money to try and solve a case. Do you truly believe that that individual is giving you the right information? Do we truly believe that what he gave you is worth $1.3 million?
The courtroom we were in Vancouver Supreme Court is courtroom 20. There was one morning in about November of 2013 when, to our utter surprise, we showed up to realize, why are none of Mike Lee's lawyers here? They're always there early and having a chat. Next, we learned from the sheriffs that Mike Lee hadn't been brought in.
My client, Michael Lee, was, prior to 2007, the head of a gang called the Red Scorpions. There was evidence from Mr. X and others that there'd been meetings leading up to the killing, and that on at least one of those occasions, Mr. Lee was present.
Michael Lee was not at the scene of the crime when the Surrey Six victims were executed. But he was on trial with 2 men who were there. The Red Scorpion leader's image was later put under a publication ban.
There was a particular day that I recall where the prosecution was showing to the court very large pictures of the aftermath of the shooting. There were 6 dead bodies. Mr. Lee was being transported to and from the trial in the same vehicle with his co-accused. Mr. Lee phoned me that evening and indicated that he didn't want to proceed anymore. He felt that his co-accused were not taking the matter seriously, and he felt that they didn't care, and he did.
So he had a change of heart?
Yes, and I engaged in discussions with the prosecution. Mr. Lee indicated that he would be willing to testify against others, and the prosecution was interested in that.
He has pled guilty to what he was charged with, that is on the conspiracy aspect of it. The Crown case with respect to the murder part of it was always weak against Mr. Lee.
It was a big moment, but I think they were pretty surprised, shocked.
Maybe we should have seen that coming. He'll be receiving a sentence with, I think I called it a sweetheart deal in front of our trial judge, just to underline how soft a deal it was.
Michael Lee was given the only sentence presented by both Crown and defense, 12 years for conspiracy to commit murder. With credit for time already served, Michael Lee's 12-year sentence has already been whittled down to 3. If he serves the mandatory 2/3 of that, he could be back on the street in as little as 2 years.
In order to get justice for everybody involved, I have to accept these consequences and bite my tongue.
You've got a new insider gang witness who's going to be testifying, and it's the guy you've been sitting beside at the back of the courtroom for all of these months. What ends up happening with him is, yes, he does testify. He was aggressively challenged on the fact that for all of these years, he'd had all of the disclosure. Couldn't be a more self-interested and unreliable witness.
The judge did not consider much of his evidence as being reliable. And so ultimately, although he made this deal, it wasn't really of a lot of value to the Crown.
Michael Lee is such calculating, manipulating. The judge didn't believe a word that came out of his mouth.
He went into the witness protection program. His identity was changed. I could tell you that I've had some contact with him and that he, by all measures, appears to have followed through and is rehabilitated.
Good morning. Eileen Mohan has come to High Security Courtroom 20 every day of the trial for Cody Havishar and Matt Johnston.
It was my duty to represent him, to be for him here, because he cannot talk for himself. I had to come to court every day to sit in front of her ladyship to tell her what I have lost.
So at the conclusion of all of this, we convened for some days of closing arguments. It is the most dramatic of things to go into a courtroom and sit down and have a judge start to read a ruling, and you don't know how it ends.
There was a fear that somehow they would weasel out of it. Would they get off on some kind of legal technicality, legal loophole?
Welcome back. Red Scorpion gangsters Cody Havishar and Matthew Johnston weren't the only ones facing charges in the Surrey Six killings. As the others waited for their day in court, the 2 men who allegedly carried out the shooting at the scene learned their fate. Here again is Jules Knox with Surrey Six seeking justice.
On October 2nd, 2014, 7 years after 4 drug dealers and 2 innocent men were executed in cold blood, the judge announced her verdict in the Surrey Six slayings.
Applause broke out in the courtroom as guilty verdicts were handed down to 2 men accused in the Surrey Six slayings. Matthew Johnston and Cody Havishar found guilty on all counts in connection with the execution-style killings of 6 men.
The courts of British Columbia today has told that you cannot walk to the doorsteps of innocent families and steal the precious lives of their children. And I know that my son is smiling down today.
A new development in a shocking crime and high-profile trial in this province. A recent verdict in the Surrey Six murders could be on shaky ground. There are new allegations of misconduct involving RCMP officers. 4 are now accused of misconduct involving witnesses connected to the case.
What do some of our lead investigators go and do? They seduce gang women, the girlfriends of gangsters, and they go off and fly them around on the public tab, going to hockey games in Toronto and have sex in hotels and go to strip clubs and drinking and partying. It was absolutely outrageous. Their self-serving behavior, criminal misconduct, all of that occurs in a way that endangers the investigation in this case.
Breach of trust for their positions, fraud with respect to submitting overtime slips, misusing the witness protection program.
Global News first broke the story that I-Hit Sergeant Derek Brassington was under investigation for allegedly having a sexual relationship with a potential witness in the Surrey Six case. But that investigation expanded beyond Brassington to include his boss and 2 other officers. All 4 now face criminal charges for breach of trust.
In a loud and confident voice, ex-RCMP Sergeant Derek Brassington pleaded guilty to breach of trust and obstructing justice by compromising the safety and integrity of a witness during the Surrey Six investigation.
Derek Brassington, lost his family, got 2 years conditional sentence, but he didn't do a day in jail.
After the gangsters were found guilty, but before they were sentenced, their lawyers called for the convictions to be overturned because of the police misconduct in the case.
The only remedy is to set aside the guilty verdict.
That's what we say, the only remedy that's available to address that prejudice.
The Crown says none of the conduct alleged by the defense warrants a remedy as extreme as throwing out the first-degree murder convictions.
As the implications for the police misconduct in the Surrey Six case wound its way through the court system, sentencing for the convicted men continued.
What was important today, I think, was for the justice system to denunciate this type of conduct, and that occurred.
Cody Havisher and Matthew Johnston, who were essentially the henchmen in the killing, were both sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years.
Havisher and Johnston each had the chance to address the court, to speak to the families. They chose not to. There were slight smirks on their faces as they were led away to serve their life sentences.
Sofon Sek, the man who duped the drug dealers inside Corey Lai's apartment into opening the door to their death, was also charged in connection to the massacre.
It may be just a coincidence, the police aren't saying, but within hours of winning $364,000 in a poker championship, Sofon Sek's luck ran out when he was arrested.
At this poker tournament, I guess there was a half a dozen RCMP officers in the crowd. Well, they were watching him like a hawk at that time because of intelligence they had. They almost immediately arrested him. Their theory was that, oh, he has all this money, he's going to leave town. He let some people in to what was alleged to be a drug ripoff. He had no knowledge that this was going to happen.
Court heard that Sofon Sek was paid $25,000 for knocking on the murder target's door.
He accepted that $25,000, and I am not stupid to think that he didn't know what was going to inspire that day.
He was originally charged with manslaughter, and he ended up pleading guilty to breaking an entry with intent to commit an indictable offense, and received a sentence of a year.
Had he not participated, the door of 1505 would have never opened, and these executions would have never taken place. He is responsible for the death of Christopher, and he's got to live with that for the rest of his life.
A year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he was sent back to Cambodia, and he passed there from his illness.
As the trial of Cody Havisher and Matt Johnston wrapped up downstairs in BC Supreme Court, upstairs in courtroom 67, Red Scorpion leader Jamie Bacon was indicted on 3 new charges, including counseling another to commit murder. Bacon is already in prison awaiting his trial for the Surrey Six murders. He's alleged to have ordered the murder of person X, who is also central to this case.
Red Scorpion leader Jamie Bacon allegedly ordered Corey Lai's murder, but he wasn't at the scene of the crime when the trigger was pulled. As Bacon awaited trial, his lawyers launched an application to get him off the hook.
Bacon's lawyer complained that her client was placed in separate confinement for 23 hours a day, at one point transferred to a filthy cell that was smeared with blood, feces, and mucus. Now a judge has ruled that his constitutional rights have been violated by prison officials for keeping him in deplorable conditions.
He ends up persuading his trial judge that she should grant a judicial stay of proceeding for an abuse of process. So his case effectively gets stopped by the trial judge.
BC Supreme Court forgot that my son was delivered to me frozen, dead, and they're worrying about a person sitting who's breathing, who can pick up the phone and call his parents. I had so much faith in this justice system and in the court system that it would protect innocent families like mine. I feel like screaming till the ends of the world.
Welcome back. When the judge suddenly dropped the murder charges against Jamie Bacon, the alleged mastermind in the senseless killing of 6 men, the public was outraged. But the Crown was still determined to get a conviction in this case. Here now is Jules Knox with the conclusion of Surrey Six seeking justice.
In 2017, a surprise decision halted the prosecution of Jamie Bacon, which meant that the gangster would face no jail time for the Surrey Six massacre. And the reasons for the ruling were kept secret. The public was told only that it was related to confidential informants and that the judge's reasons were sealed.
Now the Crown later brings an appeal to challenge that, and that decision is overturned. So he's sent back for a new trial.
But the new trial never happened. In 2020, Jamie Bacon's lawyers negotiated a plea deal.
In relation to the Surrey Six allegations, he will plead guilty to conspiracy to commit the murder of Corey Lau.
Bacon also pleaded guilty to counseling to commit the murder of person X. The attempted hit happened in late 2008, after the Surrey Six massacre, but before person X stepped forward and ratted his fellow killers out in court.
Crown and defense asking for a concurrent sentence, 18 years on both charges. But Bacon's been in custody since 2009, so he will get credit for time served.
He'll have somewhere between 5 and 6 years left to serve.
What do you say to the public who would look at that and say it's outrageous given 2 innocent people lost their lives in this?
I'd say it's not outrageous. It's a carefully crafted joint submission proposal involving the Crown and the defense.
How do we change laws so that families like us, innocent families like us, whose lives are so shattered, we don't have to stand at the court, at the doorstep of the courts, begging for justice.
6 key players were sentenced in the Surrey slaughter. Person X, Cody Havisher, and Matthew Johnston were all given life in prison. But in Canada, that doesn't mean a life behind bars. They can eventually apply for parole. For conspiracy to commit murder, Red Scorpion leader Michael Lee pleaded out to 12 years in prison, and Jamie Bacon received 18. Sophon Sek got 1 year for knocking on that door.
One of the features of this that I still find worrying is that the foot soldiers in this case, Cody Havisher and Matt Johnston, took the heaviest hit convictions for first-degree murder ×6, and Jamie Bacon and Mike Lee took the advantage of being able to plead out and get nowhere near the same kind of sentence.
But Cody Havisher and Matt Johnston didn't give up. They claimed that systemic police misconduct and the inhumane conditions of their time in solitary confinement amounted to abuse of process. They asked for their charges to be stayed.
Abuse of process is in a case where the state misconduct is fundamentally abhorrent. We don't tolerate it, and a judge is allowed to say, this is offside, I'm not going to let this conviction stand.
The case made it all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, although Matt Johnston died from cancer before it issued a decision.
In early 2023, the Supreme Court of Canada finally said, although the judge was found by the Court of Appeal to be correct in virtually every aspect of her ruling, on that one point, she was found to have committed an error, and the matter is sent back to Supreme Court in BC, the trial court, to deal with the abusive process argument.
So it's almost like you're having a hearing within the trial, but after the verdict's already been reached.
Exactly, yeah.
My first reaction was, oh my God, we're going back to court again. I thought those days were over for me.
What's going to happen next is that there will be a hearing before a judge of the Supreme Court to determine whether or not there should be a stay of proceedings.
How could it be that at that point in time the culture got so skewed that you had a dynamic where these hotshot guys, cowboy mentality, out doing whatever the hell they want, acting as if they're gang guys, seducing a vulnerable female witness who's under their control, abusing the expense account, how it is that all of those things could happen. Our view of it was that there's a need to get to the bottom of that, almost like a public inquiry, like what was the extent of this police misconduct?
Is it possible that Cody Havisher walks free?
It's possible that if he succeeds in those arguments, he would be set free.
If they walk, I think that the entire court system will then need to be overhauled.
The hearing for Cody Havisher is still slowly winding its way through the court system, more than 16 years after the slayings.
When Surrey Six happened after October of 2007, the gang situation just took off, and we still have not, to this very day, gotten control of it. That seemed to be the tipping point.
It's frightening when you realize how long these gangs operated and how basically impervious they were to policing. The Bacon family's dealing drugs for like over a decade. You know, occasionally they get busted at a shooting or something like that, but most of the time they skate. They're more likely to get shot by another gangster than they are to be put in jail for a long period of time.
The Surrey Six investigation, it is my belief that it's multi hundreds of millions of dollars, all taxpayer money.
Repeat offenders are being rotated around the court doors, rotated, and the harm they create to us is not felt by the court.
I said right from the very beginning, I wanted justice for Ed, and I wanted to see substantive changes to the justice system.
55-year-old Ed Schellenberg, the fireplace maintenance man who was an innocent victim, is remembered for his love of the outdoors and his commitment to family.
You don't know what you've got till it's gone, and I think in this case this is really being felt. We're realizing something of what that means.
If you see my home, he is my focus. I have a place for him on the dining table. Like, I regard him as present, you know. When he came to grade 12, he said, you know, Mom, can I have a break? My first question is, why? You need to go to school, Christopher. Mommy, I just want to play basketball, and I can go back to school. Because he was such a beautiful person, trustworthy. I took him for his words. But as I sit today, I am so proud that I gave him all these years to live, fly like a butterfly, live and smile and enjoy every minute of what he wanted to do. Because look at where he is today. He's no more. It was almost like God gave me a sixth sense to say, give him this opportunity to live a little in this world, because he doesn't have enough time.
To help at-risk youth, Eileen Mohan supports the Surrey RCMP Basketball Classic every year. In fact, she sponsors a scholarship in Christopher's name. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat. Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.